You're watching BCTV. We're all about Brantford. You're watching BCTV, Brantford Government Television, a service of Brantford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Brantford.
Okay, we're going to get started. Town of Brantford Board of Finance meeting for July 29th, 2019. And first on the agenda is to approve minutes of the June 24th, 2019 meeting. I believe all board members have read the minutes. If so, we could vote on them. If we'd like to defer them, we could table that till next month.
I have the minutes and I've read them, and I would make the motion to adopt them if the rest of the board has seen them and read them.
I'll second it, Joe.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next is citizens' comments, and we provide a period of approximately 10 minutes for open mic, let's say, on agenda items from anybody from the public. With no takers, I'll go to item number 3, is to consider and if appropriate approve a request from the Human Resources Director for the following 2019 budget transfer from wages and salaries, $3,310, into employment testing, $3,310. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. I'll be brief. We'd like to request $3,310 from our wage and salaries line item to the employment testing line item, which of course this is for last year's fiscal year. You may not know, but that we hired 26 full-time employees during last year's fiscal year. We lost about 27. And the prior year, we hired 9 full-time employees. Therefore, the additional cost is due to the increase in unprojected numbers of new hires for employment testing.
Okay, thank you.
Simply put.
Thank you, Margaret. Questions from the HR Director?
I'll move it.
Moved by Victor,
Second.
seconded by Robert. Is that Robert or Harry? Robert. Okay. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, before we move on, what I'd like to do is, if it's the pleasure of the board, to add the fire department request for budget transfers within their budget for fiscal 19 to the agenda.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved in second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
So next is item number 4, is to consider and if appropriate approve a request from the Board of Education to redesignate $52,366 from capital projects to entrance security upgrades per the attached worksheet. And welcome.
That's yours.
Welcome, Don and Joe.
Joe.
Welcome. How are you? So we have a letter. Don, you want to just hit the high over this presentation?
Sure. Well, we have a number of capital projects that are completed and have residual balances. And this year we had 2 additional capital projects approved for security upgrades at the entrances to Indian Neck and Brantford High School. We presume the estimates that were used for the budget to be pretty good. They came from Fusco, but as you can tell, they're kind of round numbers, and there was not any provision for contingency for unforeseen circumstances. So we are asking to redesignate the balance from this list of projects that I think you have, and reallocate them, split evenly between the 2 entrance upgrade projects.
Okay, so I'll just go through these quickly. This is the available dollars based on the fact that these projects are closed out. Window replacement, $1,750. That one's for Mary T. Murphy. The other one was for Tisco, $1,750. Tisco, is that Mary Tisco? Yeah.
Yes.
Sidewalk repair, $1,076. Roof replacement, CO, what's CO?
Central office.
Central office, 2608. John B. Sliney, hallway classroom carpet, $10,000 unused there, or available. Replace the phone system. Is that system-wide, or where was that?
That was system-wide, yes.
The 85,000, and there's 1178 available there. And J.B. Slaney Cafe VCT replacement available is 17,387. And cafe and sound system at the high school, 242750. There's also other monies of library computers, $298, and heating controls at J.B. Slaney for $13,891.57. So that subtotals $52,366.28. Jim is actually looking to approach this in a little different manner, correct, Jim?
Correct, yes.
And so that mainly because of the bond proceeds that are $14,189.57 from the library computers as well as the heating controls, that it's better for those to come to fund balance, and then we reallocate the funds a little better from an accounting standpoint. So what I'll do is, why don't we, if we have any questions before we move on some of these resolutions from either Don or Joe? Questions from the board?
Yeah, I do.
Charlie?
Hey, Tom, why are we just doing 2 schools, or have we done the other schools?
Joe?
The high school and Indian Neck School are the biggest. Indian Neck is, when you enter Indian Neck, there's no sight of anybody coming in. There's nobody right there. Murphy and Tisco, there's the offices right there. When you enter, you have vision of people coming in. The high school, when people come in, you walk into the 3 doors, and you're wide out into the open. You can get to wherever you want to go. Indian Neck is where we house our little kids. And right there, you walk in, there's nobody visual right there
Okay.
to let you in. They're buzzing you in, and you can't.
I mean, so there's no plans for the future? right
Down the road, most likely there'll be plans for Murphy and Tisco as well.
All right. Thank you.
We're just starting with our important, well, they're all important, but
Okay, other questions? So I'm going to go through a multitude of steps here in order to get you that, so we can provide this to the RTM. So the first one would be to transfer in on the capital procurement fund, transfer in of 14,000. You know what, first, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up and start here. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in appropriation for fiscal year 2020 general fund budget from $115,322,464 to $115,336,659. This increase will be funded through an increase in miscellaneous income and used to fund a transfer to the capital improvement fund. That's number one.
Want to move that separately?
Yeah, why don't we move that separately?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
It's been made second. Questions, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Then I'll read the rest of these all together, and then we can vote on those. To be transfer in on the capital procurement fund of $14,195, and increase to the BHS security entrance, $14,195, and a general fund transfer of miscellaneous income coming in, $14,195, and transfer out to Board of Ed capital, $700, $14,195, and then the corresponding transfers from, and I will not reiterate those, but the subtotal of the 700 capital funds, which I did mention previously, of $38,176, along with a transfer out of capital fund Board of Ed of $14,195, for a total of $52,371, and that's transferred to both Fund 700s, projects 20403, which is the Branford High School entrance security upgrade, $26,186, and project 2405, Indian Neck entrance security upgrade, $26,185, again for a total of $52,371. Somebody want to move those?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Jim, you're all set? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, folks, good luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jim, for your technical assistance.
All right, take care. Okay. Without the, let's see what we're going to do next year.
5.
Animal shelter.
Okay, number 5 is to consider and if appropriate hear a personnel request from Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter with the following transfer request and resolution, and I'll read it. Increase fund balance brought forward to $37,960, and increase regular wages and salaries $37,960 is what the request is, and we'll wait for the resolution until we hear the presentation.
We come bearing gifts again.
I keep wanting to get your food, but Laura keeps telling me you like these things better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if it's okay, I'd just like to say before we start that we're hosting a fundraiser on the Branford Green on August 10th called Wolfstock on the Branford Green. We hope all of you will come and participate. But I want to thank you for allowing me to come today to present regarding the full-time program coordinator position. So I wanted to go over some points of why we're in need of this position. Since the shelter opened nearly 17 years ago, the services we provide have increased tremendously. Items such as calls out to service in the field have increased from 300 per year to well over 900 per year. Foot traffic in the shelter when we opened 17 years ago ranged from 1,000 to 2,000 visitors a year, and now we're over 10,000 people annually, and that doesn't include our volunteers who are coming in. The need for this position to go from part-time to full-time is needed to support all of the current programming and to keep up with the demand for future programming needs. When Animal Camp started in 2010, we hosted it for 2 weeks and had about 30 children, and we raised about $10,000. Now we are offering 7 weeks of Animal Camp and have over 325 children attending, raising over $40,000 in revenues annually, while keeping the cost of the camp reasonably priced so many can attend. And each week of camp continues to be full with a waiting list. So we would like to add weeks moving forward over holidays and school breaks and things like that. And when the shelter first opened, they would see animals from time to time with medical needs, but they would only take in about $2,000 to $4,000 a year in donations. And many times, because they couldn't raise the funds, those sick animals would have to be euthanized. We are proud to say that now we don't euthanize any animals because of an illness or because they were hit by a car. And we raise over $100,000 a year through the fundraising efforts of staff, volunteers, local businesses, and residents that support us. And that money goes specifically to take care of these animals who are hurt, abandoned, sick, need surgeries, or other items. The money we raise also goes to help residents that are going through hardships and may need things like surgeries for their animals if they can't afford to alter their own pet because they've lost their job or going through a foreclosure or getting divorced. Another area of growth has been in adoptions. In the fiscal year of 2009 and 10, we took in adoption revenues of approximately $18,000. As of this fiscal year, adoption revenues will exceed $40,000. With this increase, we continue to keep adoption fees low at $150, with dogs and cats leaving fully altered, vaccinated, leukemia and AIDS tested, heartworm tested, microchip, and wellness checkups. We also offer a discounted adoption fee to veterans, seniors, and emergency personnel as well. We assisted over 530 animals last year at our facility. This growth has not just affected the animals. We've also helped the public by providing them with educational seminars both at the shelter and at off-site facilities such as school systems, senior living facilities, churches, after-school programs, and other groups. In 2009, for example, we visited approximately 12 schools, hospices, etc., and had 6 groups visit the shelter. In 2018, we either visited off-site or had groups come to the shelter over 100 times. These educational programs consisted of humane education about caring for animals properly, the importance of vaccinating your animals, how to avoid being bitten by a dog or a cat, meaning how to handle animals safely, and about the importance of being compassionate and thoughtful to others, especially those who depend on us. In this same vein, we also have 6 different organizations that help both children and adults with disabilities who assist us at the shelter. Each of these different organizations picks one day during the week to come and volunteer, and they typically bring 5 to 7 people with them. While they do come with job coaches, we also assist them to develop independent living skills by working with them on doing things such as laundry, washing dishes, cleaning up after animals. We also teach them about handling the animals properly. This relationship is symbiotic in nature because not only do the people develop new skills, but the animals are exposed to many different types of people, including those with wheelchairs, walker, other apparatuses, that gives us information about how those animals will do living in unique homes. This position is desperately needed in helping us to maintain what we currently have and also to allow us to continue to grow revenue-producing programs and educational programming in the future. We are extremely proud of the work we do and are one of the most respected animal facilities in the state with the best staff who truly care. We want to thank the First Selectman, the HR Director, the Finance Department, and our Commission for helping us and supporting and understanding the need for this full-time position.
Thanks, Laura. I might mention before I open it up for the questions from the board is that there was a request at the budget time to consider this, and because of the timing, we deferred it, thinking we could get through the fiscal year. Ordinarily, we try not to add positions, full-time positions during a fiscal year. We try to deal with them at budget time. This might be an exception that the board is worthy of considering. Jamie, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, well, I think Laura did a great job describing the activity that occurs within the department. As you stated, Joe, this did come before us right before the budget process, the request for this position. At that time, considering we had a new HR director who hadn't had time to fully vet the department and the position, and as well as myself, wanted to really truly that this was the position that was going to be created would really meet the need that the department has currently and as stated going forward. With that, I believe that Laura and the commission working with myself as well as the HR director, Margaret Liberta, have really feel that this position is needed and now come before you for your consideration.
Okay, questions from the board? Thanks, Jamie. Charlie?
Hi, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
Listen, this is a position that'll go from part-time to full-time.
Yes.
So the current part-time person you're receiving some wage.
Yes.
And yet the narrative says it'll be $37,960 per year, and that's what the request is for. So isn't this on top of the part-time wages?
Yes. It is. The decision was made because we didn't know when that position would be hired. We would still have a balance left over. You only have to use fund balances if you need it. So we knew it was going to be somewhere between what was budgeted for in part-time salaries and what they're looking to hire this position at. Another benefit of that is getting it in there at a full-time salary, so next year when your full-time salary line item doesn't look like it jumps 50%, you'll have that salary in there as a base.
If I
Okay.
could add what Catherine
Yep.
already said, is that if we anticipate hiring this person on a full-time basis effective on or around September 30th or October 1st, the total 9-month cost for this year will be about $28,470 in base salary. So it will obviously not be, that's including the part-time hourly rate that the person is currently in. That would be the total for those 9 months. And I think that's important. When we looked at evaluating this particular job, we looked at other positions in the town to make sure that we had an equitable and comparable job relating to the cost of the total full-time position. We didn't want to obviously pay at a higher rate than necessary, and we certainly didn't want to pay at a lower rate. So we came out with the annual yearly salary projected to be this year, based on a current contract of town employees, to be $43,654. But because we anticipate the contract, this position going into a union contract at 85%, the annual 12-month would be $37,960. And then, as I just stated, the actual 9-month full-time salary would be $28,470.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So with all the money that you've raised, I mean, do you have your own fund where you keep the money that you raise? Or is that sent over to your general fund or something?
Yeah, so we have special funds accounts set up, and we have multiple special funds accounts for different things. Like, for example, if someone does need a spay or neuter that's not a town animal, meaning like a resident needs help with it and they're out of work, then we have a special fund for that we have money in. And then if an animal that the town owns, say, was hit by a car before it came to us and then became ours, then we have a special fund for that as well. And that's where all the money goes to.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob?
Hi, Lori.
Hi.
You mentioned that from the adoption fees, you're raising about $40,000?
Yes.
That was last year?
Yeah, this
So-
past fiscal year.
So you had about 266 adoptions, somewhere in that neighborhood?
No, so we had more than that, but you have to know that our reduced rate adoption fee is $75 for veterans, seniors, those with disabilities. There's a lot of reasons why we give discounted rates. So there are people who come in, we have a ton of seniors that come to our facility, and a ton of people who just know about us that have either disabilities or are veterans or emergency personnel or things like that. So we assist a lot of people with adoptions and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, so I'm kind of looking at this as almost a wash if we're gaining fees through that process. Almost a wash, pretty much. No bennies in there, but.
Yeah.
And is that a number that has been going on for a couple of years, or is that something that as you get more well-known out there, people are coming to the center?
Yeah, yeah, as we continue to get our name out there, then more people come to us for adoptions and we're able to assist more. It cost us a lot more to care for the animals than $150, if you can imagine, because it just spaying and neutering and vaccinating. And so fundraising offsets all of that too, to go back to the question of like, what do you do with the money? So like, we have a lot of bills every month because of course, as soon as you take the animal to the vet, they find out something else is wrong and you have to, go. And it's sort of like going to the mechanics, you can bring it in for one thing and they find 3 other things. So, so we're always having to fundraise to keep up with everything.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Charlie?
So I just found out the adoption fee on Rescue 4 is $300. No, you mentioned 75, which is extremely reasonable.
Yeah, and especially for everything that you're getting. Most average adoption fees are $400 to $500.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, Joe.
Harry?
Yeah, on an annualized basis, including health and welfare benefits, what's the total package for this person besides that salary?
If you ask me on an
Annualized basis.
It would be the amount for this full-time person would be about $16,322.
Additional.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read, any other questions? If not, I'll read the resolution. And again, we're looking to increase the fund balance brought forward, $37,960, and increase, that's on the revenue side, and on the expenditure side within the animal control fund, regular salaries and wages, increase that by $37,960. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in the appropriation for the fiscal 2020 animal control fund budget from $334,072 to $372,032. This increase will be funded through a transfer from unappropriated fund balance.
I'll move it, Joe.
I'll second it.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Victor. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay, I'm going to give Chief Mahoney opportunity to step in, if you like, for a, I'll call it either number 6 or 5A. For some reason, we missed the agenda, to put this on the agenda, so we did add it to the agenda, Chief.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'm not going to read them, but I'll let you rattle through the multitude of transfers that you're requesting within your budget.
Thank you. Yes, as you said, they are in my my budget. Didn't look like that was going to be the case for most of the year, but the overages in the accounts are all as a result of some retirements that we had, and then we had a very unusual year. I mean, I don't know what a usual year in the fire department looks like yet. I'm going into my 5th year, but I can tell you that, you know, we had 3 very long-term injuries resulting from surgeries and stuff that members had. So they all had to be replaced, and those are the replacement costs. None of these have anything to do with the new positions at all. But if you remember, we had approved a contingency transfer for the new positions into my budget, and we didn't hire the new positions until February. So we originally planned for a January start. We didn't start them until February, and then we didn't, you know, they were in training and whatnot, so we didn't use replacement costs. So even though those costs were all budgeted in that contingency, we didn't replace them. So that's what gave me the surpluses in the accounts to move within my budget. So most of these are related to the retirement, the people who are out on the long-term sick, our mechanic who does a lot of, who does all the work on the vehicles, that's paid for out of the overtime account as well. Some increased training costs that were as a result of the safer hires, and then what did I want to say? The accrued sick pay.
Okay.
So we had $24,000 of accrued sick pay that was paid out to the retiree.
All right, so for the record, I'll read through these. From regular wages and salaries, $35,000. From purchase services, repair and maintenance, $7,945. Transferring into overtime, $42,945. That's the first one. Second one is from vacation, $39,000. From stipends, $12,000. From utility personnel, $3,000. From hydrants, $652. Transferring into sick pay, $54,652. Third is from holiday pay, $17,200. From overtime, $8,700. From other fuel, $3,800. From ambulance billing, $3,369. Transferring into education incentive, $33,069. The fourth item is from hydrants, again, $19,000. From employment and testing, $5,102. Into accumulated sick pay, $24,102. And finally, from administrative expense, $1,240. Transfer into furniture and fixtures, $1,240. Do we have questions from the chief on this presentation? Charlie?
Hi, Tom.
How are you?
How many people retired?
So we had one person left for another town early into the year, and then we had one retiree.
Okay.
And
How many are out sick now?
right now, everybody's back.
Oh, they are, good, okay.
They were back at the end of May. Everybody had come back at that point. And the new positions went online to the increase in the shifts in July. And then we have one current vacancy from a retiree that occurred July 1st.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I move the transfer, Joe.
It's been moved by Jeff.
Second.
Seconded by Bob. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All set, chief?
Thank you for accommodating me.
You got it. Okay, what I'm going to do is, because I talked to Jim about the ordering of numbers 6 and 7, so we're going to start with number 7 and then weave our way back to number 6 and then on to the other agenda items which are somewhat related. So Jim is going to explain the logistics of these capital transfers and projects, along with John the engineer and Dan from the plant. How are you, folks?
All right, thank you. Yeah, as you can see, that handout has a lot of pages, so there's quite a bit of things to unpack here. So I'm going to work off my memo. If I mention things that are in there, it's not that I didn't think you read it, it's because the folks at home are trying to follow along, and there's a lot going on here. So the first thing I think everyone needs to really understand is that our sewer system is a large infrastructure system. The system was constructed in 1961, so it's at least middle age. And myself, I was born in 1961 also, so I do know that regular maintenance is important. But the system includes the wastewater treatment plant, an interceptor line and laterals. And it's critical because about 20% of our grant list is related to commercial properties, either through the actual real estate, personal property, or vehicles. And you can't really have that sort of robust commercial district without a sewer system. Think breweries. We wouldn't have breweries in town if we didn't have a sewer system. And the vast majority of residents are also connected to the sewer system. So I think, you know, in the overall context of what this system does for the community, its importance cannot be understated. And over time, we have put some major dollars into the system. I recall the plant upgrade in 2003. 2005, we had a federal and state EPA and DEP consent decree because we were having sewer overflows in the collection system. That basically underscores 2 points. One is that it's important to maintain the system, and three, if your maintenance efforts are insufficient and you actually end up having overflows, both the state and the federal government take those things very seriously. Again, the consent decree was a difficult time for us, but we did get through it. In 2015, approximately 12 years after the upgrade to the plant, we had our engineering firm AECOM do a study, which they did, and they've identified just over $6 million worth of improvements to the plant. Those are things that you are acting on an annual basis, funding those through the Sewer Reserve Fund. And you'll see that over the years in the town's capital plan. So the takeaways going forward is, well, how much are we asking for and what is it for? How are we going to pay for it? We've already addressed some of the consequences of not doing it. And is there ever a risk of doing too much sewer work, given the size of the infrastructure? And I think the answer to that, the fourth one, is clearly no. But the first one, if you look there, is to do improvements to the Hemlock pumping station. And I'm just going to touch on these briefly, and I'm going to get into some of the other funding aspects, and then if you have more specific questions on the projects, Dan and John can answer those. But we're estimating that could cost approximately $1.1 million. The reason we're here tonight is that we recently opened bids, and the construction prices are good for 60 days. So after your action tonight, if you were to approve this, then we're also looking for the RTM to act on it as well. The other piece is doing a lot of lining in town. And one of the pieces that was known is, you know, over the last 2 years, we've spent about $96,000 for 6 emergency repairs. And then in doing that, there was a lot of camera work that was done. That camera work has looked at the system, and they've identified areas that are critical in terms of their need to be repaired. And, you know, so if you were to think of it as a traffic light, some are green, but the ones that are red and orange are the ones that are going to require some attention. And we're anticipating that if you were to approve this appropriation, we'd be doing some of this work over the next possibly 4 years. And it may require additional appropriations in the future as well. One of the things that, when we were talking about the need to start funding these projects, and this came up during the budget process, I believe it was Peter Black who asked, who's here tonight, was basically, what about the sewer assessment fund? And so, so I started looking into that, and during my time in Branford, which is, I'm into, I think, my 21st or 22nd year here, what I observed was the town basically used the assessment fund to pay for debt service on sewer assessment bonds and to fund new sewer installments and extensions. So it really wasn't used at the time for maintenance of the sewer system or capital repairs to the sewer system. It was used to pay off debt service, and it was used to fund sewer installments and extensions. And Joe, you and I talked about this because, you know, I value your history on this, and you wisely thought we should also look into the state statutes, which I did, and I will confess I didn't go to law school, but I've identified in the memo two sections of the statute, and they're both there. The long and short of it, it appears that because we don't have any sewer assessment bonds outstanding, that we could actually use some of the sewer assessment fund balance for this purpose. Now, obviously, we have to be, somewhat cautious about this because we don't want to take so much of that we would be issuing sewer assessment bonds in the future. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So, in looking at the sewer assessment fund, basically we ended last fiscal year with about $3 million. I'm just going to round up $3 million. We anticipate that at the end of this year we'll probably have about $3.1 million. And you have two items on the agenda tonight. $50,000 for a Riverview sewer extension, which is an increase to an already existing project. And then you have a transfer into this appropriation request of the $3.975 million. And then also, some years back, I believe it was around 2012, this body and the RTM approved $1.1 million for sewer extensions in the area of Pent Road. And at the time, that was going to leverage a proposed development. So whereas the town would put in a line, and they would also help extend the line. And so that has not happened as of yet. But since that's still, I would say something that's could potentially get jump-started, I think it pays to keep some money in the sewer assessment fund for that. So basically, that would leave a fund balance of about $2 million. $1 million would be potentially available for the Pent Road project, and then the rest would just be the normal fund balance. So again, that's something we were responsive to. That was a concern that was raised during the budget process. We looked into it. We discussed it internally with the first selectman, and that's something that is being recommended here. I think the other thing to look at is, what is the overall effort? What is the overall effort in terms of maintaining our sewer system? And what I did was I attached a worksheet, one that looks like this, and that shows you a lot of the capital projects that have been put in place, and some of them are actually planned, some of them actually been acted on. So if you look at the first part where you see total plant and you see $6,036,752, well, that goes back to the AECOM study where we were essentially taking money from the sewer utility fund balance along with our existing sewer reserve balances, and we identified a series of projects. Now, some of those projects haven't started yet. Some of them are completed. Some of them are ongoing. Then we looked at the collection system. So what have we done for the collection system in recent years? $2.5 million for pump station improvements. $1.1 million back in 2012. That was the Pent Road project I mentioned previously. And then $150,000 from the sewer assessment fund in fiscal year 19 for the Riverview extension, which is another item that's on your agenda later. So what are we looking to add tonight? We're looking for this authorization of $3,975,000, of which $2,975,000 is going to be, something that we're going to borrow for. The whole authorization is for $3,975,000, but our plan is to only issue debt for the $2,975,000. And if I could call your attention to the bond resolution, if you see in section 2, and I could read it because it's a short paragraph. The total estimated cost of the project is $3,975,000. Up to $1 million of funding other than bonds is expected to be appropriated and applied against the bonds authorized herein. So that's the $1 million from the sewer assessment fund. Now, if you look at this as a whole picture, and I think this tells a positive story. So if we take the collection improvements and the current projects and projected projects for the plant, the town of Brantford is investing $13.8 million in its sewer infrastructure. And at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about how important that is to the community. When you look at what's the makeup of that, only about 40% of it is planned to be financed through debt. We've already issued $2.5 million, and then the $2,975,000 that we're talking about tonight. All of the rest of it is funded either through pay-as-you-go or other, which would in this case be the sewer reserve fund and the sewer assessment fund. So I think when you look at the overall aspect of this, we are doing and planning to do some significant improvements to our sewer infrastructure, and it's not all being funded through borrowing, which I think is a positive outcome. Now, obviously, when you borrow money, it's not free. We all recognize that debt can be a good tool, and debt can also be a burden. And Brantford has done a pretty good job at managing its debt. Other governments have had challenges. And so the question is, well, then how does this fit in with everything else we're doing? Okay, so I mentioned at the last meeting when we were talking about some of the things down the road is the town of Brantford is planning to issue debt the end of the summer, early fall. So this fiscal year 2020, we're going to be issuing about $35 million. The next year, we'd be issuing $17 million, potentially $8.5 million in 2022, and that would include these projects. And in doing so, we're still within our overall targets. We can structure it in a way that we're not getting, large, now large is a relative term, jumps in the annual debt service. For example, I read in the paper in some of the local communities that have done major capital projects, they get debt service spikes, their budgets get voted down in a referendum because of it, and then they got their capital projects. When I made presentations to this board before, we've always talked about trying to come up with a debt plan that was logical and budget sensitive. And one of the aspects of that is to say, okay, how can we structure this? How do we manage our maturities? When do we issue? And essentially, how do we basically keep our debt service burden so that it's roughly 8% or less, and below 9 is great, by the way, of our overall tax dollars that we're spending, the overall budget dollars, which means that basically 8 cents of every tax dollar is actually going to fund infrastructure projects. Okay, so I think when you look at it in the context of even a household budget, when you look at a family income, family mortgage, family credit card debt, family car payments, family student loans, 8%, I think there's a lot of people that would love to trade places with the town of Brantford when it comes to what our debt burden is and how we fund this. Sort of the soft debts we've talked about at other meetings, whether we're talking about pension or OPEB. So we're on track with those. We're on track to, when it comes to funding the library, the schools, the community house, and this as well. And just like it's important to invest in schools for education, libraries for culture, and then recreation, it's also important to invest in our sewer infrastructure. So what I'm telling you is that is the amount that's before you tonight. if I want to throw the roads in as well, we're talking about $4.7 million. It's something we can accommodate within our existing debt plan. It's something that we can accommodate within our annual budget. And so, so that's sort of looking at it from my viewpoint, a financial viewpoint. In terms of the elements of the project, you know, pump station versus interceptor versus force main versus the type of pipe it is, and extending Riverview Avenue to service 10 homes and the challenges there, I'm going to have to defer to my cohorts here on my left and right, who also assisted me in putting this letter together. So,
Thanks, Jim. Dan, you have any comments with regards to this?
Well, I definitely think it's a good idea. I've mentioned it before. The system is from 1962. We've had problems that we caught early, and it didn't become into a big problem because we got in there and relined it. Some problems we didn't catch, and it turned out to where a small bill of, say, 50,000 turned into over 100 because we had to physically dig it and replace the pipe. So the quicker we get on the infrastructure and start doing projects, the better off we'll be for future years.
Okay, thanks. And John, could you just touch on the Riverview extension?
Sure. So, you guys had previously appropriated the $150,000 for the Riverview Avenue extension. That was based on a rough estimate. We've since gotten the final design and the final engineer's estimate, which is why we're asking for the increase of the additional $50,000 there. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the Riverview Avenue side is down in Short Beach, very rocky area. We've got a lot of septic problems down there, in addition to 3 holding tanks that the treatment plant weekly pumps out. So that's really the need. We've been kicking this around, as far as I can reach back, was about 2006 is when we, the engineering department's been talking about extending the sewers down to that area.
So this is a low-pressure force main?
Mm-hmm. So we can put in the infrastructure, the pipe infrastructure, and extend laterals out, very similar to what we would do for a gravity system. But because of the gradients and the rocks, the rock profile that's in that area, every individual owner would have to have their own pump system. So they would, instead of having that centralized pump system and then the town being responsible for that, the maintenance and the cost of the central pump station, each individual owner would be responsible for their own pump and tank.
So how do you determine the assessments for those particular homes?
You came up with the estimate was about $200,000. Looking at the homes that are in there, we internally kind of looked at it through the WPCA and had looked at the benefits to the town. You know, 'cause if we assess this directly at 100% cost to the residents, it would be pretty cost prohibitive based on the tank system that they have to provide themselves and the installation of the sewer itself. So I think through the WPCA and internally decided that a cost share option was kind of the best way to go to really promote people to hook up to the sewers there.
So what's that percentage?
It's about 50-50.
50/50. Okay, thanks, John. Questions from the board? Victor?
Yep. Jim, you mentioned that you were going to borrow, actually, Section 2 says you're going to borrow $3,975,000 and then pay back $1 million. Is that?
No, it's the authorization for 3.975, and then when he goes to finance it, he'll only finance less $1 million, right, essentially. So it gives him...
Yeah, up to $1 million
Applied
funding.
against the bonds authorized
Yeah.
herein.
Well, that's because you have to authorize the bonds and you authorize the expenditures.
And
then how you finance it, you could pay the whole thing off, or you could finance the whole thing. In this case, it's saying that we're not gonna finance the whole thing, we're gonna apply $1 million from the fund
Okay.
balance to
All
it.
right. Thank you.
Yeah. Charlie?
Listen, I got a couple of technical questions, if you don't mind. You're replacing cast iron with ductile iron. Is there a reason? I don't know the difference between cast iron and ductile iron. Is one more, you'll have a longer life?
Cast iron is a lot more brittle, which is why we've been having these breaks. I believe it was 6 in the last couple years. As that pump turns on and then shuts off, you end up with a lot of
kind of the same water hammer type thing you'd get in your home if you shut valves off really fast. That's why we were having a lot of breaks in that system. That cast iron is very brittle, so I believe that the piece that Danny pulled out of the ground, they hit it with a sledgehammer and it just broke apart. So ductile iron is a lot more forgiving, but can withstand those pressures that we're dealing with on Hemlock.
And plus, the pipe was installed in the early 80s, so it's been underground a long time. Lifespan is about 50 years.
Okay. I have one more question. On this cured-in-place pipe, how is that done?
What they do, they have to, they come in and they'll videotape the line, they'll clean the line, depending on the size, and then they have a video camera that goes in and it records and measures where everybody's sewer lateral is hooked up to the street. So now when they're done with that and they're gonna come in and reline, they have to set up bypass pumping. So if you have a manhole here and a manhole here, and you wanna reline the section, now they're gonna take the flow that came here, put in a pump, bring it around, and continue down the road, so that line is empty.
Oh, okay.
So when that line is empty, they'll take a felt liner that's like a sausage tube. They drag it through after the line has been cleaned. They grab it at both ends, and they put a big steam pump on it. It inflates it like a big sausage, comes up on the other end, and the steam cures it. So it's cured in place pipe. And once it cools, now they get in there and they cut the ends off, and they cement around each manhole opening from one end to the other. So now they're done with that, it's sealed. Now they come back with their cameras, they go back into the measurements they took earlier. They have a remote camera and a remote tractor that can go in there with a saw. They stop, go through, and it drills the hole, moves on to the next, and that's how they connect everybody back up again. And actually, it's pretty cool, and but it saves a lot of money because you're not digging in the street.
Yeah.
And when we relined East Main Street there, from Lynn's all the way down to Riverwalk, it was like 1,200 feet, and they had to set up a bypass, and yeah, it was kind of a pain in the butt, but if that collapsed, we would have had a really big problem. And they did it, I think within a week it was done, and I think that was back in 2012. And just that project alone, I think including the bypass, was like $500,000. And that's something that we caught by regular maintenance, going in with a jetter, coming back, and we noticed the white sludge coming off the pipe, and we stopped it, and we sent the camera in there, and RCP is reinforced concrete pipe. So H2S, when it sits in this, H2S forms, or H2S is a gas that forms in the sewer from everything decaying. On the top of the pipe, the crown of the pipe, it gets into an algae, green algae, and it's similar to battery acid, and it's very bad for concrete. So once it sits there for a while, it starts eating it away and dropping down. And that's what we were getting back when we came back with the jetter. We got in there with the camera, and you could see the reinforcing rod of the pipe. It was kind of scary. It's like, well, you better do something, because if a big truck come by, it's going to go like that, and you got a problem. Now you got sewage all over the place. So by addressing it quickly, we saved ourselves a big problem. But there's a lot of pipes like that in Branford, because it's just, a lot of them come from the 50 pump stations we have in town, all have an outfall pipe. You know, they lift the sewage, brings it to an elevation to come down to the plant, and normally those outfall manhole, those lines, since the sewage gets agitated, it releases that gas, so it makes it hard on the pipes. And back then, they didn't have one type of pipe. Now they got ABS or plastic pipe, which can handle it. You jet it, you clean it. It's kind of impervious. It may crush, but the gases aren't going to get it. So, and then you get transite pipe. That's another one that's got asbestos in it. That's very brittle after the years. You got your asbestos, your clay pipe, which is also very brittle. Like the center of town, when Branford got the new sewage plant, the first two projects that they did were the center of town and then surrounding going out. All those pipes are the red clay, like terracotta pipe you find in your flower pots. That's what's under there. And what happens to that, the HS doesn't get it, but it's subject to cracking. The roots are getting into it. Bad connections from connections later on, they didn't know how to do it. So now you got root intrusion, which causes more problems down the road. So the more you can videotape and find out problems ahead of time, you can reline it, and rest assured you'd have a lot more time on the pipe. But but that's how they reline the pipes.
Okay,
Sorry, I got
that's the
carried
short
away.
version, huh?
That's good.
Just to
Yeah,
briefly
thank
add-
you, Dan.
Briefly add to what Danny's saying, that liner is structural, so if the pipe around it,
Yeah.
collapses, cracks, that liner is a pipe in itself, so that's a structural pipe. It helps out with the inflow and infiltration, and we end up with, a lot of the clay pipes, those loose joints, you end up with a lot of groundwater that comes in. The treatment plant has to treat that, so that comes at a cost, so everything kind of works together. Kind of identified 38 miles of pipe that we use lining over some point in the lifetime, so.
What does it cost per mile, essentially?
That varies with size.
Yeah.
We have a lot of 8-inch, 10-inch, 12, 15, 18, couldn't give you a price on it.
But we're going out.
Yeah, we're currently getting requests for proposals
Okay.
to get someone on board as basically our vendor for lining projects.
Thanks. Victor, and then, Victor, and then you had a question, Bob?
Yeah, I just, did WPCA look at this yet?
Well, actually,
The projects they have.
the projects they have, yeah.
But not, they don't need to be involved in a transfer?
Well, basically, ultimately, you guys would approve it.
Right.
And then the bonding, I don't think the WPCA acts on. So.
No.
But the piece, WPCA has approved the projects.
Yeah, in previous budgets, yes.
Yeah, so are you talking about, so if we look at the, that sheet that I have,
They're all numbered projects, right?
yeah, all the numbered projects that WPCA has been involved in. This project that we're asking for, the 2.9 million, that was identified as a Hemlock project and something that was part of Dan's budget, but it was like $500,000 a year that was identified. And then when we were talking to Dan, after he had done his budget, we quite honestly were saying, well, what's involved in this? Because I did recall that they had looked at a lot of areas of town, and that's why I talked about the traffic light in terms of the condition of the lines. And at the same time, John had mentioned to me about the what they were estimating it might cost for the Hemlock project. And I said to Dan, I said, yeah, but I said, we got a whole system that we need to take care of. How much would it cost to deal with a whole system? And you said?
Millions.
Millions. So, so this plan, I don't think the WPCA has seen, but all the other elements, I think they've actually have touched at some point in the process. But I don't go to their meetings, so you guys do. So if I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me.
Dan Gregory brought it to the budget process, and then this last year I was
Yeah, I've been kind of advocating that we do something to put money away for the infrastructure. I've said this before, I don't know if my number's right, but I think I'm pretty close. It's like 70% of the town's assets are buried, that you don't see them. If you had to replace every sewer pipe in town, you're gonna have a real high bill rate, and that would cost millions and millions. So the quicker we're on it now and stay on it, it's a good thing.
All right, thanks. Victor, you had a question?
I did, yeah. You mentioned earlier that the early sewage, sewer pipes were clay in the center of town. Have they been relined?
No, a couple of them have, not a necessity, but no. And we just got done doing work there on Ivy Street, which was one line, we have an old timer, Jimmy Prim, that works with us, and he's giving me the history, and he says they got linens, they got this, they got that, when they did the first digging. He said he thinks that was part of contract one, when the first ones went in. And those pipes there, that project, or the problem we had on Ivy Street is that all the connections were done different back then. And through the earth shifting or other people working in the area where they hit a pipe and they don't tell somebody, and they throw a piece of sheet metal over it and cover it with cement, and they say that's patched. So now you're letting roots get in there. So I had three or four houses that I had to pay for Johnny V's to come in, because when we videotaped it, we saw root balls right in the middle. And who do you charge for that? It's in the middle of the street. Branford's thing is you to the curb, right? But it's in the middle of the street. So you really can't lay it on the homeowner. So it was something I got in there and preempted another backup by getting it. But a lot of that pipe, especially Ivy, I think it should be relined, because when we looked at it, there was a lot of cracks at all the connections coming in. So it's just a matter of age, and when the ground settles, it cracks. You get a crack halfway down the pipe, now you got roots coming in. And then you got your I&I, like John was saying, that doesn't help the treatment.
So Dan, getting back to what I was saying about when you looked and you cambered all those lines, and to use again the traffic signal analogy, so that the area you're describing, Ivy Street, center of town, clay pipes, that was one of those red areas, correct?
The lines that we have the traffic signals on and rated, those are all the outflow manholes from the pump stations. So there's other parts that need to be relined that we haven't really assessed yet, put it that way. I mean, when we do our cameraing, we'll put down the condition of the line. There is a couple that need attention, but they're not outflow manholes from the pump station.
Right, but that would be something you would use this money for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, other questions from the board? If not, I'll move on. So first will be to consider this appropriation from, let's see, for the sewer assessment fund, transferred fiscal year 2020, increased fund balance brought forward by $1 million, and increased transfer out by $1 million. Related would be infrastructure enhancement fund transfer for 2020, a transfer in of $1 million, and an increase capital outlay infrastructure of $1 million. So with that, resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in appropriation in the fiscal year 2020 sewer assessment fund budget from $14,926 to $1,014,926. This increase will be funded through a transfer from unappropriated fund balance and will be used to supplement the rehabilitation and replacement of sewer lines and forced mains. Somebody want to move that?
I'll move that.
Victor moved it, seconded by Jeff. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then for number 6, I'll read that as well. Sewer assessment fund transfer fiscal 2020, increased fund balance brought forward $50,000, increased transfer out by $50,000, so we're increasing both the revenue and the expenditure side. And then in the capital 700 fund, transfer in of $50,000 and increase the expenditure capital outlay infrastructure by $50,000. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in appropriation for fiscal 2020 sewer assessment fund budget from $1,014,926 to $1,064,926. This increase will be funded through a transfer from unappropriated fund balance and will be used to supplement the Riverview Avenue sewer extension.
I'll move that, Joe.
Been moved by Jeff,
Second.
seconded by Victor. Nobody from the right side here is making any motions on this?
No, they're jumping on us.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And number 8 is the actual bond authorization. And I'll be happy to read it unless somebody from the Republican side would like to waive the reading of the
I'll waive the reading.
oh, Harry, you're all right.
Harry.
What, was Bob or Harry?
I did that.
All right. Somebody want to second
I'll
that?
second it, Joe.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so that resolution will be resolution appropriating $3,975,000 for the town of Branford sewer system improvements and authorizing $3,975,000 of bonds of the town to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowing for such purpose, and to recommend the resolution for adoption by the representative town meeting.
I'll move that.
Been moved.
I'll second it.
Wait a minute.
Harry.
It's been moved by Jeff, seconded by Harry. Thank you, Harry. Comments, discussion? I will point out that that does, as we said, Section 2 has the allocation of up to $1 million of funding to reduce the total borrowing. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of the sewers for tonight, and good luck with that, Dan and John and Jim to some extent. Related is item number 9 as far as appropriations, and this is a road infrastructure. Jim and John, you want to cover this request for East Industrial Road? With Jamie assisting. So this request is to request for $1.75 million to rebuild East Industrial Road. Who wants to start?
Sure. I'll just start.
First Selectman?
All right, so we come before you today to request funding for East Industrial Road. This is a road we started to look at a few years ago. As far as the condition, we are currently spending quite a bit of money out there and resources in temporary patching that road. This is from Leeds Island Road to right past the 56 entrance and exit ramp, down to about 750 feet to the east to Sycamore, or Pin Oak, actually, Pin Oak. This typically, as you know, we don't bond road work. We typically use either other funding sources such as Town Aid for Roads, LoCIP, as well as the general fund dollars that are put aside for our capital dollars. However, this isn't a maintenance, this is a full reconstruction of East Industrial Road, right down through reconstructing the base, and John can certainly talk about details as far as the evaluation that the engineering department has performed on the road, as well as the full, what's incorporated in that full reconstruction. So I think this is looking at this road differently than we do when we consider our road maintenance, road improvement program through the budget process. You know, Jim and Dan pointed out to the importance of our commercial base. We certainly, Leeds Island Road is a road, or this East Industrial Road certainly services a significant amount of our tax base that we require on. There's a significant amount of traffic that goes on that road. You may be thinking, well, what about if there's future development that may occur along that corridor? Really, this is an obligation that lies with the town. It wouldn't fall under a future development cost for the type of reconstruction that we're considering. So with that, I let Jim, or John, do you want to speak about the, or why don't we just have Jim explain the finances, and then if anyone has any specific questions regarding the condition of the road and what's required to reconstruct it, John can answer that.
Yeah, and again, when I was talking about the sewers, I was talking about the items here tonight, and it was roughly about $4.7 million. That includes the East Industrial Road. But this will allow us to, get working on it sooner. And, a lot of these projects have escalation costs, and, there's a fair chance that the escalation costs are going up. borrowing costs, interest rates, as you can see from this chart, or maybe you can see from there, are actually going down. So it's not a bad time to start looking at funding it this way. But it is a reconstruction as opposed to maintenance, so it makes sense to do that. We typically have been issuing 20-year bonds. The internal maturity for this one will be less than 20 years. We're probably looking at funding it over 10 years. But, I mean, that's sort of inside baseball, so when you look at all the internal maturities of a bond issue, but, so essentially we're looking at doing this for 10 years as opposed to 20. And again, this is something we could spread out over 10 years and get the improvements in the next year, so.
So, John, you want to touch on the scope of work here? Does this include a widening of any of the road?
So this does not be a widening. Right now, it's one lane each direction with, like I always call it, a suicide lane growing up, that middle lane, turn lane. So we wouldn't be widening, it would be replacing in kind. We don't see any traffic issues on East Industrial Road at this point. The real problem is that, it was built almost 40 years ago. I mean, the lifespan of a road is only about 25 years, given good maintenance. And it's just, it was originally built in the 80s. It wasn't, it was built part of an industrial park. But that's when from what I understand, the Leeds Island exit was right up to Leeds Island. DOT came and made that on-ramp, off-ramp, without any provisions for the extra traffic that would have put on East Industrial Road. So between, kind of I don't want to say lack of maintenance, but maybe not the proper maintenance over the 40 years, and then adding this additional truck traffic on there has really deteriorated, and I'm sure any of you that have driven on that road have seen how bad it's gotten. At this point, there's no alternative treatments you could do. You couldn't overlay it or anything like that. You're looking at, again, going right down to the dirt and rebuilding that road to a proper structure that can handle all the truck traffic and the amount of traffic car traffic that comes onto that road.
How long will that project take?
I would say it would be a good year of construction. The traffic control is going to be the biggest hurdle. We want to keep those businesses open. So the contractor is really responsible for coming up with a plan to be able to, again, ramp those driveways up, not interfere with traffic. We certainly know that DOT is not going to be willing to close that exit off. So I could see it being a pretty complex full season of construction.
Okay, questions?
We're going to have a toll booth once we finish this? Pay for it?
I'm not going there.
Not going there. Okay, so any other questions? No questions from the board, so I will again entertain a motion to
I'll move it.
waive the reading of the full resolution.
I'll second that.
So is that what you, Bob, and seconded by Victor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the resolution is for rebuilding of East Industrial Road per the description of the 750 feet as described in the memo. Resolution authorizing $1,750,000 for the reconstruction of East Industrial Road and authorizing the issuance of $1,750,000 of bonds of the town to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose, and to recommend the resolution for adoption by the RTM. So we want to move that?
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Thank
you. Sure.
I believe that was your last item, correct?
What's that?
That was your last item, right?
Yes.
You're getting ready to adjourn. I know it's been
Yes.
a long night. I appreciate the board for coming. I just want to make the board aware of, I had a meeting last week with the BCTV manager, Walter Mann. He made me aware of a proposed rule, 5-311, for the FCC is considering, which actually would put in jeopardy our franchise fees that we receive from Comcast and AT&T. They're expected to make a decision on that rule August 1st. I just bring it to the board today just to, and I will send you some information regarding it, because potentially it could have a direct and immediate impact on the funding for BCTV, which obviously we rely heavily on for the public educational government channel that we have. So currently, we receive roughly $75,000 in franchise fees, which funds about 80% of BCTV's operations. Walter Mann actually also is the manager for North Haven cable television. So he had reached out to First Selectman Frieda of North Haven, which I had then followed up with a conversation and sent some information. Selectman Frieda serves on the executive board of CCM. He is bringing that forward to CCM to get them to advocate on behalf of the municipalities. However, I just thought I should bring that to the board's attention.
Yes, thank you, Jamie, appreciate that. Okay, with no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, good job.
Phone ringing, and I had one more.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Brantford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BrantfordTV.org.